The drought had lasted so long that even the wind sounded tired. It dragged dust across the cracked fields of Caleb Turner's ranch like it was sweeping away the last hope he had left. Caleb stood on the porch of his weather-beaten farmhouse, staring at cattle ribs visible beneath sagging skin. His ranch was dying, and so in many ways was he. Caleb Turner had once been known as the toughest rancher in the valley. He had inherited the land from his father, along with pride, grit, and a stubborn refusal to quit. But pride didn't pay debts. Grit didn't make it rain. And stubbornness didn't keep the bank from sending letters stamped final notice in red ink. He hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks, except the feed supplier, who no longer extended credit. Loneliness had become part of the land. His wife had passed 5 winters ago, and the silence she left behind echoed louder than any storm. One afternoon, desperate for cheap labor he could barely afford, Caleb drove his old truck into town. That's when he saw it, a fenced yard behind a warehouse. Boys hauling sacks of grain under the watchful eye of a foreman, with a belt hanging loosely in his hand. The boys were thin, too thin. One of them stumbled. The foreman didn't hesitate. Caleb froze. He didn't know why he walked toward the man. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. "How much?" Caleb asked, his voice low. The foreman smirked. "For what?" "The boy." The foreman laughed. "You buying cattle or charity?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "How much?" The price was disgustingly small. The kind of number that made you realize how little the world thought a child was worth. Caleb handed over the cash. The boy didn't look up as the foreman shoved him forward. He looked about 12, maybe younger. Dirt smeared across his face. Bruises too fresh to ignore. Eyes too old for his age. "What's your name?" Caleb asked once they were inside the truck. The boy hesitated. "Don't have one," he whispered. Caleb gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Everyone's got a name. They just call me Boy." Something inside Caleb cracked. On the drive home, silence filled the truck. But it wasn't the heavy silence Caleb was used to. It was cautious, fragile. When they reached the ranch, the boy looked around at the open fields, the sky stretching endlessly above. No fences, no shouting. "This is yours?" the boy asked quietly. "For now," Caleb muttered. He showed the boy the small spare room. It hadn't been used in years. Dust covered the dresser, the bed creaked, but it was clean. "You'll sleep here." The boy stared at the bed like it was something sacred. "You can use the bathroom whenever you need," Caleb added awkwardly. "And no one's going to hit you here." The boy blinked. Caleb turned away quickly, pretending to check the window latch. He didn't know why he'd said that. Maybe because he saw disbelief in the kid's eyes. The first few weeks were rough. The boy flinched at sudden movements, ate like someone might take the food away, worked without being told, too hard, too fast, like rest was forbidden. Caleb noticed. "Slow down," he snapped one day when the boy nearly collapsed carrying feed. "You're not a machine." The boy froze. "Waiting," Caleb sighed. "What did they do to you?" Silence. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the oil lamp, thinking about the warehouse, about the belt. The next morning, he did something he hadn't done in years. He cooked breakfast for 2. The boy entered cautiously, as if expecting a trap. "Sit," Caleb said. The boy sat. "Eat slow," Caleb added. "There's more." The boy's hands trembled slightly as he held the fork. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Something changed on the ranch. Rain finally came. The cattle began to recover. But the biggest change wasn't in the land. It was in the boy. One evening, as they repaired a fence, Caleb finally asked again, "What should I call you?" The boy hesitated, then softly said, "My mama used to call me Daniel." Caleb nodded. "Then Daniel it is." That was the first time the boy smiled. And for the first time in 5 years, Caleb felt something like hope. But hope doesn't grow without storms, and a storm was coming. The bank manager arrived in a polished car that didn't belong on dirt roads. Caleb saw him from the field and knew it wasn't a social visit. "You're behind again," the man said flatly. "We can't extend this any longer." Caleb looked at the land, at Daniel fixing a trough nearby. "I'll make it work." "You won't." The words hit harder than expected. "We'll take the ranch by the end of the month." Daniel had overheard. That night, Caleb sat alone on the porch. He thought he had rescued Daniel. But now, he was about to make him homeless again. Daniel stepped outside quietly. "Are we leaving?" he asked. Caleb swallowed. "Maybe." Daniel looked down. "I can go back." The words sliced through Caleb's chest. "No!" "But I cost money," Daniel said. "I eat." "You're not a burden," Caleb snapped. Then softer, "You're not for sale. Not again." Daniel stood frozen. The next few days, Caleb worked like a man possessed. He sold equipment, took extra hauling jobs at night, skipped meals. Daniel noticed. One morning, Caleb found Daniel gone. Panic hit instantly. He searched the fields, the barn, the creek. Nothing. Then he saw a small crowd forming near the main road into town. Caleb drove there fast. Daniel stood in front of the old warehouse, the same warehouse. But this time he wasn't inside the fence. He was speaking, voice shaking but loud. "They beat us. They starved us. They sell kids like animals," townsfolk murmured. The foreman stormed out, red-faced. "You little—" Caleb stepped forward. "Touch him," Caleb said, his voice deadly calm. "And I swear you won't use that hand again." The townspeople began asking questions. More boys came forward, bruises shown, stories told. Within hours, the sheriff arrived. By sunset, the warehouse was shut down. The foreman was in handcuffs. Caleb turned to Daniel. "Why would you risk that?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Because you told me I wasn't for sale." Caleb felt tears sting his eyes, something he hadn't allowed in years. News of the shutdown spread. Donations began arriving from town. Feed, tools, even money. The bank manager returned, but this time his tone had changed. "Looks like the community believes in you." Caleb looked at Daniel. "No," he said quietly. "They believe in him." The ranch survived, but more importantly, it transformed. Caleb turned part of the land into a refuge for boys rescued from labor camps. Daniel helped welcome them, showed them how to ride, how to mend fences, how to laugh again. Years later, when reporters came asking how it all started, Caleb would just say, "I thought I was saving a boy." He'd glance at Daniel, now taller, stronger, confident. "Turns out he saved me." And sometimes, the thing you think is your last desperate decision becomes the reason you find your purpose. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even in the harshest deserts, kindness can still grow, then make sure you subscribe to the channel.